I'm Matthew, and I'm an outboss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on today's show, I am thrilled to be interviewing Matthew VanHorn, who is joining us all the way from San Francisco. So Matthew, are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
I am. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. So a little bit about Matthew. He started his first coaching business 7 years ago, and he began by helping gay, bisexual, queer, and queer men gain more confidence and self-love so that they can improve their intimate lives. He and his partner, Caleb, both experienced great success in their businesses, and now they work together helping people in the LGBT community to gain the confidence, clarity, and courage it takes to make a big difference with the work that they do. So Matthew, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing for our Rainbow family. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Yeah, so this baby of ours, Caleb's my partner. I'll refer to him a lot. We're partners in business and life. And this came about because we knew that we wanted to go in business together at some certain point in our relationship. And we also saw that there were a lot of people out there who were providing business tools and bringing people together in community, but nobody was really doing it for our community, for us. And it really inspired us to pretty much take drastic action and change the path that we were both on. Like you said, I was doing coaching and with relationships and self-confidence, and Caleb was working as full-time as an attorney, like an immigration attorney. And we had this moment where we realized that we were going to dramatically change the trajectory of our lives. And so what we do primarily, we are looking to focus on those people who are visionaries, leaders, change makers, who really care about the people that they're working with and who want to have a big impact. It's become almost political for us. I see what's happening in the world, and inside, I just know that if our community has more resources and we're stepping fully into our power as leaders, we can change what's going on. We can shift things.
Yeah, I think that it's really inspiring to see what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that Diane Klein, who's a fellow friend, connected us, just because I think for both your business and what I'm trying to do with the podcast is really trying to lift up some of the great work that LGBT business owners are doing. There's a report that the NGLCC put out. I think this was actually this year. And in the report, they said in 2015 alone, LGBT businesses generated $1.7 trillion in revenue, which is incredible, right? I mean, it's huge. That's a huge number. And just to think about how we as LGBT business owners can create economic opportunities for other folks within the Rainbow family is really huge. And you've been coaching for 7 years. You all have a background in the law as well. Right now, as you're kind of applying all of your expertise in your business, where do you see the opportunities? I mean, you had mentioned kind of the current political and cultural climate that we're in. What's most inspiring for you all today, and where are the biggest opportunities in your business?
Yeah. So one of the things that became very apparent to us as soon as we jumped into this kind of like niche, right? Like it is a niche. And we found that for a lot of people, it's not a matter of if they want to be business owners. For those people who are transitioning or those people who don't fit in and they live in the middle of nowhere, starting a business is sometimes their means of survival. I was thinking when we started this business, like, oh, we get to work with just entrepreneurs who have a really beautiful idea to start a business. But the truth is that when we're reaching out to people and we're talking to people in our community, just seeing them light up at the idea that they could share a gift that they were given through just being born, like a gift of being here on the planet could actually turn into a profitable business for them.
Yeah, 100%. We are talking about for a lot of LGBT folks living at the margins. So for LGBT people of color, for trans folks, especially if folks are navigating poverty, but having those survival skills of just getting by day in and day out. And really for a business like yours and for other folks in the space, showing people, here's some options on how to transfer your skills if you want, and providing that pathway to start up your own business, right? And it's not just people in tech with the next great artificial intelligence idea for a business. You know, it's for people to see this as a way of almost getting around some of the institutional discrimination that lives within bigger organizations that haven't done the work to create inclusive spaces for us. So I think you're right on with what you're doing, and it's awesome. So you had talked a little bit about your origin story of getting your business started, and I want you to share with us a little bit more about that motivation. Coaching is an incredibly rewarding space, and you were already coaching gay, bisexual, and queer men, and you had the vision to have a business with your partner, Caleb. Tell us a little bit more about that decision making, what went into it, what was ultimately that moment where you're like, okay, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I made it kind of seem like it was just like an afternoon where we were sipping tea, and it was just like the right thing to do. But the truth is, like most origin stories, it was an intense moment of like pain and discomfort for us. There was a period of time a few years back where Caleb actually got super ill out of nowhere. And we had no idea what was going on. We took him to the hospital. There were ambulance rides, and he would be at the hospital for nights at a time. And there was one night where a nurse came to us, and she actually said, I might tear up a little bit, but she said, you might want to think about end-of-life preparations.
Oh my God.
And it was like, whoa, this is it's a unique feeling to feel at like 30 years old, to be like, oh, okay, like I just met this guy not long ago. He's freaking amazing. We get along so well. And now like we're talking about end of life. It was kind of like this whirlwind. And we were kind of stuck in this like Western medicine circle, which I have no opinion on Western medicine, good or bad, but the circle that we were stuck in was not serving us at all. And we ended up actually going to like some Chinese medicine route, and he ended up getting better, which was miraculous in so many ways. Wasn't expected. They thought it was cancer. They did like all these bone marrow tests. It was intense. But that was a moment where we were faced with this decision of like, by that point, we were both working for ourselves. I had my coaching business was fully self-supporting. I should say, when we met and first started dating, I was working like, I call it the side hustle struggle, where I had like, I was a handyman, and I was cleaning houses, and I was working at a restaurant, and I was trying to get my coaching business full time, and I was doing body work and all these things just to try to like make ends meet. Caleb was working like 80 hours at a law firm that was eating his soul. And so we were both working ourselves to death. And so by the time when the sickness came around, we were both working for ourselves, and he was still working a lot of hours. He opened his own law firm, and I was working a ton of hours because I was now a full-time entrepreneur trying to get my business to be fully self-sustaining. And we realized in that kind of moment, when we realized that he could have died very easily during this experience, that we wanted to spend even more time together, which is funny because we spend a lot of time together. We live together. We are always together. And it was just this idea, like, I want to spend more time with you. It was funny. It wasn't even a question when we decided like what we were going to do as a business together. It was like, let's lead with generosity and take the tools that we've learned, take the struggle that we've had, and bring it to our community. We live in San Francisco. We see queer trans people of color in our community struggling. We see fellow queer people struggling. And it was like, what can we do to help?
That's really powerful. I like what you said around leading with generosity and being of service, and how that's helping sustain your business, right? And also a couple of pieces that I pulled from your origin story are just that decision, making that decision after such a traumatic moment. And thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing that. I mean, that was a hard time for you all, and you made the commitment and the decision, and you did the side hustle struggle of doing whatever it takes to get it off the ground. And I think that's really inspiring for some of the folks who tune in who are still toying with the idea of, do I start? Am I going to put in the time? And just kind of giving a pathway of what worked for you all. You had mentioned for Caleb, he was working, sounds like, for a corporate law firm or something like that, 80 hours a week. That was kind of sucking his soul out of his body, right? And, so on that topic of workplace culture, as you're building your dream business, your dream life together, what's one thing that you're doing inside your business to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible, especially for folks that you've mentioned who are at the margins, who are often either excluded from dominant workplace culture or just never really truly feel like they fit in?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because it's a question that's not asked enough. Caleb and I, from the outside, we completely understand that we are white, male-appearing, straight-passing for the most part, able-bodied, all of these things that we have awareness, which is, I think, one of the first steps is just being aware of who you are as a person. And also the next step is understanding and admitting the fact that no matter how much we study, no matter how many workshops we go to, no matter how many close people we keep around us and hire to teach us, we will never know what it's like to be marginalized in the ways that we are not. And so really listening, we are huge advocates for listening and asking questions when it's appropriate. Because I feel like that's something that's just not done enough. One of the things that we see a lot of people run into is they come from a really heart-centered place. Because I think that there's a lot of well-intentioned, good-meaning people out there. But when somebody reacts to what's going on, instead of just like holding space for an individual to feel what they're feeling or to have an emotion or to react a certain way, we jump on this explanation train where we try to explain what we meant, or we try to explain, oh, but that's not what we feel or believe. And so instead, just like listening to the way that it impacts people. I don't know if what I'm saying is along the lines of what you were talking about, but
yes, 100%. I mean, what you were talking about with explaining away is, I mean, you touch on something really important, distinguishing between people's intentions versus impact, right? And like you said, a lot of us are very heart-centered, we mean well, and we don't have control on how our behaviors impact other people. And when people kind of say, ouch, you stepped on my toe, it's broken. And you can explain, well, I didn't mean to step on your toe. Well, the toe's still broken, right? So you have to kind of listen to where people are coming from and deeply listen, even when it's hard and it feels like you might be called out, right? Or you're learning something new. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. And to kind of stitch that into your business, then you have this awareness and you also recognize your privilege and that your knowledge doesn't exactly replace the actual experiences of being marginalized in ways that you're not. So I think everything you said is right on. And I wish more business owners could take that and really reflect on what that means for their own businesses. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about your identity and Caleb's identity as they kind of like fit within the broader rainbow community, and to kind of think about a couple of times where that's been helpful and been challenging. And I like to start off with the challenges first. So if you could take us back, this could be in your business now, or maybe when you started out in coaching. This question, I don't know if it applies to you, but if it does, that could be helpful. Where it was challenging for you to be 100% out because you're afraid of losing a client. I guess like in this case, not so much your clients, but maybe a contractor that you're working with, or just kind of negotiating business community in general and trying to network and explain the value that you're adding with your business to other business owners. Can you think of it like one particular example where your LGBT identity was something that you were like, I don't know if I should disclose as much about myself and my business partner in this situation? If something specific comes to mind, would you mind sharing that and tell us how you were able to work around that?
Yeah, for my personal business, I know that when I was coaching men around the area of sexuality and self-confidence and self-love, it was difficult for me to, at times, be as open about what I did with a broader community. And so the voice that I talk in right now, and Caleb actually caught this with me. He was like, when you jump on a Facebook Live or when you are on the phone with certain people, you completely drop all this fun from your voice. You completely change your voice and change your demeanor. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I wasn't even aware of, that I had this kind of filter that went on so that people would perceive me a certain way. So I'm not sure if there was ever a moment that I can pinpoint where I was like, I can't be myself.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Just kind of that noticing that changing your behavior of dropping your voice and filtering out the excitement or fun that you have in your business. Can you think about the times that you did it? Who were the people that you were doing it with that made you kind of change? Yeah.
So I would go to networking events, and that was always a tricky thing for me. Even to this day, well, it's a lot easier now because I've got a lot less filtering going on. But I would go to networking events and I would be talking to people, and that question of well, what is it that you do? And I would say things like, well, I'm a relationship coach. And I would just completely minimize the work that I do and minimize how awesome I was. I think the way that it shows up for me the most is physical appearance. And this has been a struggle that I've kind of always gone through, is that I have a nose ring, tattoos. I wear like basically boots every day because I ride a motorcycle, and the same pair of jeans and a t-shirt like all the time. Like that's my go-to look. And so I like to be comfortable. And I know that like for certain things I would dress up and put on like dress clothes, and it would just feel so fake to me and so phony. It felt like I was selling out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you are creating your own business, right? And so I don't think this has ever come up on this show, but I've definitely listened to other entrepreneur podcasts where people talk about the pressure of creating their own dress code, where it's like, well, we just created this whole business and we work from our home. So why are we getting dressed up? Or so it's interesting that you are noticing these kind of patterns at networking events or different places where maybe you weren't necessarily surrounded by your clients who like, know, and trust you and are obviously working with you, right? But just thinking about trying to get your message out to other business owners and thinking about that there's a certain way to do that. Are you thinking that there's a different way now that you're more aware of how you've kind of filtered yourself in the past?
Yeah. Well, for me, I believe now I can dress comfortably, but still put together, if that makes sense. Like I can still be intentional about like how I look and those kinds of things. Like I said, I don't edit myself that much anymore. And I honestly, truly believe that when it comes to being a business owner and an entrepreneur, that it's number one about connection, like building connection with the people that you quite possibly could work with or who could serve, not even necessarily work with. Caleb and I have a generosity-based business. We do not care if we give out everything that we have available in terms of our knowledge to people for free. We do a 2-day live event that people can get full scholarships and attend without paying $1. And the whole reason is because we're not scarcity mindset. It's more of like generosity and flow. But I realized that when I would go to workshops and I would show up and I would be dimming my shine or dulling my fabulousness, that there was no connection there, right? Like being authentic and just being real. It took a struggle to like figure out what that even looked like for me. Because it was like, oh, wow, like who am I in a professional space? Like who am I in a workshop space as a leader? Who am I when I charge people to work with me? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Fun psychological experience.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. I mean, what you're talking about is the concept of covering at work or as a business owner, right? And that Kenji Yoshino he does studies around covering in the workplace. And the interesting thing that comes out of his research is that like 75% of people in the United States cover in the workplace in some way. So it's either around appearance, it's around association, your family composition, all sorts of things. And I'm curious, as you're talking about you noticing how you've covered in the past, right? Of like, just kind of like maybe not wearing your nose ring or covering up your tattoos, whatever. Do you think some of that relates to being LGBT and some of the limiting beliefs that society has thrown our ways? Or is it just how you've been conditioned around what's professional and what's not?
I think those two statements are very intertwined. I think the LGBTQ people, I don't know anybody out there who had like a perfectly epic coming out story where not a single person has been in opposition to them, or who haven't gotten some sort of crappy response on social media or some sort of uncomfortable interaction of somebody just basically telling you that you're bad for being you. And my coming out story was relatively great. Like my family was pretty good with it. I had some really crappy things in school. It was high school. But in general, like the people around me really accepted me. But those moments that I can like think of in my past of people calling me names and pushing me up against a wall, or people driving by when I'm holding hands with my boyfriend down the street and they yell fag. Like, I think these things have a big impact on to what extent we're willing to put ourselves out there, right? Caleb and I have had a lot of conversations around this lately because we realized that we dealt with it in two different ways. And so when Caleb was growing up, he grew up as this kind of like bull-dyke lesbian persona. That was his identity growing up in high school. And so when people would say something to him, he was very confrontational about it. Mm-hmm. And my way of dealing with confrontation was to kill him with kindness. So I was like always trying to get people to like me. And so it's funny because when we started this business, I wanted everyone to like us. So I was afraid to post on social media. I was afraid of getting any sort of bad review. I was afraid of giving feedback forms at workshops because I didn't want anyone to be in opposition to me.
Yeah.
And Caleb was like all for it. He's like, let's do it. Like, who cares if people don't like them? F them.
It sounds like y'all are a good balance, right? Which is always good to have in, right? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting what you're talking about and these experiences where, as you were talking about, at least like immediate family, it sounds like there was a lot of acceptance in your experience of coming out, and yet you're still shaped by the fire by where society is still at today and not quite being as accepting as we would want. And I think that those experiences of being shaped by the fire make us very, very powerful as communities of LGBTQ folks. And so the show is about empowerment. And I would love to hear your take around what some of those superpowers of being LGBT are in general and how that helps you stand out as business owners in the work that you're doing today.
I love that you said superpowers because that's something that I say all the time. I always say being queer is a superpower. Are we allowed to curse on the show? Is that
Yeah. It'll just have an E next to it, so it's all good.
I won't do it if it's. I feel like I'm editing my language a lot.
Don't filter. Just be you.
I mean, the truth is, queer people are some of the most forward-thinking, open-minded people who have ever existed on the planet. Not all of us, by any means, but as a people, as a community, we have looked at the world that has constantly looked at us and said, you shouldn't be this because it makes me uncomfortable. And we do it anyway because we know who we're called to be. We know who we are. The truth is that if you're queer, you're special. Like, it's just, there's no doubt about it. Like, we're fucking unicorns. Like, and that's magical. I get really passionate about queer people being seen, stepping into leadership. Like, I want this world to be run by queer people. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's great. I would add our allies too. There's awesome allies everywhere. And I think what you're saying is right on, where being in a world that there's still certain institutions saying that LGBT people are quote unquote wrong, et cetera. And so I think it's that the intuition that we have inside of us of knowing who we are and being really self-actualized and questioning those institutions or even immediate people in our lives that are saying otherwise, and having that inner strength just to say, I know who I am, I know I'm a good person, and being able to kind of set aside what others are thinking of us or individually. I think that's what you're saying. And I really like that. I think that that's helpful for a lot of folks, regardless of if you're a business owner or not, just tuning into the show. So thank you for sharing that. Considering some of the harder things, or just like the things that you've noticed around filtering and how maybe being a part of the many LGBT communities that are out there. So some of those challenges, but also like some of the superpowers. What do you want our listeners to take away from this interview, just to be inspired to be more authentic in their work, whether they're doing the side hustle thing, they're thinking about getting started, or they're in their businesses right now?
Yeah. So I always say that our life and our experience is the greatest tool that we'll ever have. And any struggle that we've ever been through is there so that we can, in then return, be a teacher for others, right? So it's rare for LGBTQ person to not have some struggle in their life of some sort. Like, it's just systematically, it's built so that we do struggle. And the thing to remember for me, like I said, is just like, how can that struggle actually become our biggest asset? How can that be a tool that we can actually leverage? Like, leverage that pain, leverage that experience, and see what happens if you kind of like flip that over. One of the biggest moments in my entire life happened to me 10 years ago, where I got clean and sober. I was drinking a lot and really kind of spiraling downwards. And if you asked me in that day, when my life kind of completely fell apart, and you asked me even that week or that month while I was in the middle of that chaos, I would have had a much different story than I have 10 years later, where I now say that that's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, because it's allowed me to have that experience and then use that experience to help other people out there who are struggling with similar things in their life.
That's beautiful. I think that's beautifully stated. And as you said, there's opportunities in the struggle. I think when you're in it, you don't see it. Although with time and experience, I know for myself, when I'm going through something hard, it's like, I know that there's a solution in this, or there's some kind of life lesson. And I can't wait for a couple of years to pass by so that I can remember what that is. So I think just having that perspective and sharing that as guidance for our audiences is really, really valuable. Before we go into some questions around business mindset, I was curious somewhat related. You talk about your business being a business that's centered around generosity. And so this question, I'm sure you have a lot of responses to, so I'm excited to hear what they are. So what's one way that you all are giving back to LGBT communities as you're building out your business, as I say, as you're crushing the business? What are the things that you're doing around charitable giving, volunteering, even thinking about if you have work to contract out, how you make decisions around that might be beneficial to LGBT talent? What are some things that come to mind immediately that you're doing right now?
Yeah. One of the things that we do is just a ton of free events. Like we do a ton of free workshops. We really try to get, like I said, the information that we have into the hands of as many people as possible, because I think that that's one of the keys. We've got to be willing to teach as much as we know to as many people as we know freely and just give it away, because if it's in the hands of the people who can use it, then everybody wins, right? Mm-hmm. And to a lot of people, it sounds like that's like a crappy business model. But the truth is, what we do is if somebody wants to dive deeper and work with us, then yeah, we have a program and we have things that set up so like you can dive deep with us. We'll coach you for a year and that kind of stuff. But we don't do that thing where people are like, oh, well, here's the carrot of what's possible for you. But in order to learn anything about how to get this carrot, you're going to have to give me money, mm-hmm. Which is just anyway. And so I've done a lot of answering phones for LGBTQ crisis hotlines, which has been just an unbelievably rewarding volunteer opportunity. And Caleb worked with the local gay lesbian center here in the city with a Hire Trans campaign to really promote hiring transgender people. And yeah, so and even in our business model, like if there's an exchange of money between us and a client, we have a really, I say this word wrong every time, Caleb makes fun of me, but a philanthropic.
Yeah, you got it. You did it. Yeah.
I typically say philanthropic.
Yeah. It's not an easy word. Yeah.
But we really try to make sure that we have built into our systems a way to give back, so that as we scale, so does our ability to give back. And then there's something that, and maybe this isn't worldwide or with all of us, but in the circles that I've run with a lot of my life, because I tend to be more to the outsiders and the pierced and tattooed freak kind of people who sit in the corner at dances kind of thing. And it was almost like the system rejected us, so we reject the system. Mm-hmm. And we don't want anything to do with politics, or we don't want anything to do with capitalism, or we don't want anything to do with the system that's in place. And so I find that a lot of queer people take themselves out of the equation altogether. And I don't know if that's the right solution. I don't know if there is any right solution. But what I have found is that right now I live in a city, and there are people who are making decisions for us, whether or not we want them to. Mm-hmm. They are sitting in offices that people elected them into, or the system has let them be in the office, even if the people didn't vote them in. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what side of the game do I want to be on? Do I want to just like cut and run? And the truth is that it's great if that's an option for you. But at the same time, I try to think about the youth, right? Like there are LGBTQ youth who don't have the privilege of being like, fuck capitalism, fuck politics, I'm out. They're in the system. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I almost feel like it's our responsibility to step up and be smart about our vote and to push politicians that we really want to see in a place of power who are aligned with our beliefs. Yeah, so I could go on and on and on and on about that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you've given us a lot of different ideas on how we can build our own businesses with that philanthropic mindset. And I think that that's really helpful of just kind of, as you kind of think of, even if it's like every dollar you bring in, for that dollar, what percent is going to taxes, operations, owner's pay, profit, and also charitable giving. And I love that you're building that early on so that that's a muscle that you can continue to flex. And as you scale, you're going to have so much of a bigger impact on doing the crisis work that you're doing or helping with the initiative to hire more trans people in the city, right? You're doing all of that and you're providing a great example for other businesses. And I think what you're doing too is just you're mindful of the role that capitalism plays on how that hurts our communities, that especially our communities that are at the margin, and you're still creating within that system so that you're building out economic opportunities for people that would otherwise not be considered or not feel safe enough to work for an employer like what your business is becoming. So you're giving another option on ways to shape a system that is pretty flawed. It hurts a lot of us, in the rainbow family. So I really appreciate that you're aware of that and that you're being bold enough to create. And it's much easier to criticize than create, right? So
we went to an event recently that was about racism and white supremacy in the queer community. And they said something really powerful that I think relates even to what we're talking about here, is that if you want to bring down a building, right? Like if there's an abandoned building that you want to bring down, if you explode it from the outside versus detonating it from the inside, one is way more effective, and it's from the inside. Mm-hmm. And so they were talking about how we could be better allies as white people to people of color. And it was like, you've got to do it from the inside. You have to go into the inside of your own organization and your own culture and be those little detonations within to help bring down the structure. And it resonates with me when it comes to like capitalism and government and all these things. It's like from the outside, you can keep throwing rocks at this gigantic skyscraper, or you can step inside and say like, how can I use this to my advantage and to the advantage of my community? Because one of the things that we work with people on is like, for me, it was really big to start making $10,000 a month. I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Like, mind-blowing for me to go from making on average like $2,000 a month to making $10,000 a month while not overdoing it with the work. I could actually do free workshops and all this stuff because of the model that we use and making sure that we only work with people who are aligned with us and just being really authentically centered in our hearts. So I started telling people, we would love to help you make $10,000 a month. And for so many people, they were like, well, I don't want to make $10,000 a month. I'm okay with like $3,000 a month. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you are. But what if you did make $10,000 a month? And if you didn't want it, you gave $7,000 to a homeless shelter for transgender youth. Mm-hmm. What if you made $20,000 a month and you gave $13,000 of that to the local career center in your community and like help them keep their doors open so that people who are maybe not able-bodied or who are systematically repressed have a chance.
Yep.
Because I kind of take a stance that's not necessarily favorable, but we have an obligation if you're able-bodied or wherever you fall on the spectrum of marginalization, there are people that you're either standing on or lifting up. And you got to be present to that at all times, because this whole idea, this is honestly one of the things that inspired us, because we thought for a second about just doing like online webinars and online programs and not having any overhead and renting hotels and all this stuff. And it was this moment where we sat at our kitchen table and I was like, no, we need people to come together in community. We need people to physically interact with each other. And we need people to lift each other up in a different way, in a really connected way. And if that means like our overhead is $7,000 for an event, and that's what it means. Because there's this phrase that just runs over and over in my mind. It's just like, we're so much stronger together. Like we are stronger together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, in a world where it's this paradox of being hyper-connected, right? I mean, we're having this conversation. I'm recording in Florida right now, right? So, I mean, we can do that. And yet, at the same time, there's a rise of feeling lonely and isolated and cut off from communities. So the fact that you're creating real live in-person events is essential, I think, at this moment in time that we're in, where, I mean, loneliness is on the rise. And I can only imagine, I don't know what the studies are, if they even exist, but what that looks like inside queer communities, that must be high. We've got about 10 minutes left in the interview. And I did want to ask, a couple mindset questions before going into our quickfire questions. And when we think about the business mindset, thoughts of imposter complex pop up every now and again. And so I'm curious, and Matthew, this is probably when you first got started coaching 7 years ago. How did you overcome that feeling that you're not ready yet or you're not good enough? Or did that pop up for you?
Definitely did pop up for me for sure. Have you ever heard of Mel Robbins?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, yeah. So Mel Robbins she was like a turning point TED Talk for me. So I love TED Talks. I listen to them all the time. If I'm like, there's always a TED Talk in the background. And she just said something that really resonated with me, where she's like, there's no such thing as ready. Like, you'll never be ready. But so many people spend their entire lives waiting for ready, and it just doesn't come, right? And so that really helped me battle when I was like deciding, because for me, it was like letting go of that restaurant job. Because that voice in the back of my head said, if you let go of this restaurant job and you do this business full time, there's a good chance that you can fail. That first client who's paying me thousands of dollars for coaching and consulting, it was like, what if they're disappointed? Just the chatter, right? Mm-hmm. And so just remembering that, like, my brain is in a bad neighborhood, it's typically not on my side. My brain is not on my side.
How did you overcome those feelings when the self-doubt popped up and you're getting started and you have all this stuff to do? There's a lot of overwhelm. What was like one or two strategies that worked really well for you?
So the first one is, it's definitely community. And community is everything. Surround yourself with people or groups of people who are willing to support you when you're struggling and celebrate you when you're succeeding. And if you have a single person in your life who, if you told that you're like, I want to build a rocket to the moon, and they told you that's a ridiculous idea, consider maybe not hanging out with that person that much. I think about my circle of friends, and I think about the people who I surround myself with now. And these people, no idea is too big. And if I'm like, hey, I want to have this crazy event, they're like, what do you need support with? How can we make it happen? What do you need to make it your vision a reality? And so that was key, to just be surrounded by those people. We created a mastermind group on Facebook. It's the Queer Visionaries Mastermind Group. We're selective about who gets into it because we really want to make sure that people are there to support each other in a powerful way. It's not like a sales thing where it's like, oh, we're going to sell you and sell you and sell you and sell you, or people are just dropping like links to their businesses. But it's like, hey, I have a project and I want to make it happen. What can I do? So that would be the first one. Community is super important. And then Caleb and I talk about taking imperfect action. Just take action and know that if it unfolds easily for you, then it's a blessing. And if it's a struggle for you, then there's something to be learned there. But It's literally what we call like just acting through the fear, right? Like imperfect action through the fear.
I love that.
Everything that I've ever wanted was on the other side of something I was super afraid of.
Yep.
And it took a while for me to realize that I have a new kind of detector for whether or not this is something I should do. And it's if my hands sweat, my heart beats really hard, then it's typically something that I should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, pay attention to your body. It gets you out of your head and it allows you to sometimes point you in the right direction. I love that. I love surrounding yourself by community and this concept of imperfect action, and the struggle arises, just to test and change. I think that's really, really smart.
Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to jump into our bonus round. And this is all about getting a chance to get to know Matthew a little bit better, understanding what his and Caleb's business does, and how we can stay connected with him after we ask this very fast round of questions. So, Matthew, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So in a word, sentence, or phrase. That's kind of how you respond to the questions here. Do you have a mantra or quote that you reference, especially when times start to get hard and you're in that struggle phase?
Mantra or quote? Well, my mind's like gone blank, but just go for it. Like, just go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. There's one that's popping up in my mind lately, and it's like, success is on its way. I desire it. There's no need to fuss. I love that. So, but anyway.
One more thing. I have to say too, like, stop living in the if-then. Like, life is not an if-then situation. If you're waiting for money and then you'll be happy, like, no, stop that cycle.
Yeah, yep. It's like both and it's in your life now. You just have to really seek it out or identify where it is, right? Okay, so can you share a personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
Yeah, so we meditate every morning, and we also work out every day, and we are pretty strict vegans.
Nice.
So a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
In the morning, so our discipline all happens before 9 a.m. Our day starts at 6:30 every day, and if you can get a jump start before the world has a chance to get against you, like, you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah, it's like that miracle morning setup.
Yeah, totally.
So what's one thing that you all readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at?
Yeah, so I'm the social content visionary, that kind of stuff, and Caleb's got a very organized mind. He's just freaking genius. And so he's a very grounding force, and I'm a very wild force. And so we typically will delegate things based on that characteristic.
Nice. It's a good balance. So 2 questions left. And the first one is, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Yes. I will say, do something that you love. There's so many people out there who do work that they do not like. And for many of us, work takes up a lot of our time on this planet. So if you can combine something that you enjoy doing with something that you get paid to do, you've hit the jackpot. And don't let anybody tell you that that's not possible and that work should be work and life should be life, because that's not true.
Yes. Love
It's
that.
It's about as true as the fact that we choose to be who we are, right?
Yep.
That's outlandish to us, but for some reason we believe this other thing.
I love that. So Matthew, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Yeah, so our website is LGBTQ Entrepreneur.com. We're on Instagram, LGBTQ Entrepreneur, and Facebook. Anybody can reach out to us. And if you look up Queer Visionaries Mastermind, there's a few questions to fill out. But we would love to see people from all over the world coming together to support each other in our visions. I really want to see queer people take over the world. Our allies, too. I don't speak to the allies that much because, well, they're allies.
Yeah.
Talk to you that much, but queer people are special.
Yeah, I love that. So Queer Visionaries Mastermind. So I'm definitely going to check that out. It sounds awesome. And I encourage all of our listeners to check that out. And we will include all of the links to find Matthew and his business on the outentrepreneur.com's website. So Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. As always, it's my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Matthew. So for details again from today's conversation, check out the show notes at www.outentrepreneur.com. And as a next step, subscribe to the podcast, consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes, and be sure to share the show with a friend or a loved one. For now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.